I've got no idea if this is even working. But anyway, there's a conversation you've had with fans of clubs you're not really sure about, and you ask them, who are your main rivals? And for most United fans, that's really easy to answer, but not everyone agrees. With Leeds back in the division, for as long as they're in the division, that's the topic. Which team, whose fans get under your skin the most? Is there anyone you've begun to hate, or a bunch to whom you've mellowed? And which supporters make you laugh the most by trying too hard? Murph, who are Manchester United's mortal enemy?
To me, it's Liverpool. I grew up in an era when I first started going in 1982, when Leeds had just been relegated. City were going to get relegated the following summer. Liverpool gets United virtually every game between Liverpool and United in those days was a belter, and off the pitch it was pretty interesting too. So Leeds and City became an irrelevance to people of my age group.
Even if you grew up in whom? No City.
Well, there was City fans around there, but nobody was paying. It was more United. Of course, there's City fans around there, but I mean, it was more people going to United every weekend on the 256 outside St. Lawrence's and catching the 256 outside St. Lawrence's, or the bus outside the Bull's Head, and getting down there than he would be go to Main Road.
But I remember when they got promoted back when I was a kid, and the noise definitely increased. Do you know what I mean? So it would have been different, right, when they were in the first division rather than the second. And I guess that's one of the things related to it.
Well, when he got promoted in, 1985, surely they made themselves noisy for the summer, for a few of them, but it soon ascertained itself pretty quickly that they were rubbish again. They relegated themselves. They relegated again 2 years later. There was obviously City fans around, but to me, the only relevance. My first derby at Main Road was in 1985, and it was United fans had outnumbered City fans that day. It's probably City's most humiliating ever day. City to us, obviously geographically they were rivals, and you come across people on the street or in school who would get a bit gobby, but they were pretty much irrelevant. Liverpool was a big one, and in those days, the papers would say United against Liverpool. They always had this headline, Battle of the Giants. It was the big one. It was like Hagler and Hearns twice a season. That's what United and Liverpool was. They'd come into it. They were there. They were like a wasp that needed swatting.
But Liverpool, do you remember when you were first aware of that rivalry? Do you remember when you were first kind of, right, okay, there's a thing that happens, especially in the Anfield game, where I hate it. It's the absolute worst feeling, I think, just before a game at Anfield. I can't stand it because it's horrible, I think, because what can happen there is just, well, when it happened with that 7-0, I've kind of almost become numb to it now, but even I think that's the worst feeling anyway. It's the most tense I ever get in football immediately before Anfield.
I couldn't agree more. You see, the thing is, I grew up in an era, like I say, with Atkinson's United sides, that they went to Anfield and Liverpool, and they didn't lose at Anfield in 8 years. Liverpool, they always lay a glove on Liverpool, and Liverpool would face, no matter how good the side Liverpool had, and Liverpool had a fantastic side for all of the 80s, United would turn up there and stick it to them, which must have really got on the Scousers' nose at the same time, which would have intensified it for them. Now, of course, Everton won the title a couple of times during that period, so it got a bit intense for United and Everton and Old Trafford as well. But really, it was always United and Liverpool for my time of growing up. And I would say that since Hillsborough, there's still an intensity to the United Liverpool games, but I've struggled to think of any classic games for United Liverpool since Hillsborough. There'll be one or two, like the 3-3 at Anfield in 1994. There'll be one or two that don't immediately spring to mind. The FA Cup game at Old Trafford 5 years later. But before Hillsborough, every time United played against Liverpool, it was a belter.
Yeah, that tallies with me. And my first away game was at Goodison when I was a kid, and I remember the feelings really intense, really strong feelings, but it never translated off the pitch at all. You never thought about them away from the game. It was just during. So, Pete, does that tally with you?
Yeah, very much Liverpool as the main rivals. Because of the persistency of it, I started 64, so Liverpool had come out the second division. I kind of didn't know that. They were just in the top flight. But United and Liverpool dominated the next 4 league titles through the 60s. And they were our rivals because they were our rivals on the pitch. They were the closest team to winning something. And I always thought it's United's league, it's United's cup, it's United's European trophy. Who's trying to take it off us? But I guess my disliking for Liverpool wasn't to do with what the team was doing. But the first time I went there in October '68, All the windows got put in on the Fields End's coach coming back. We got chased across Stanley Park. And I was, 12, 13 then. And it was an eye-opener for me. Trouble had been brewing in the 60s. To experience it firsthand was a bit shocking. I hoped it was a one-off, and it wasn't. Every time you went there, you took your life in your hands, avoiding Stanley knives, flares, bricks through the window. In the 80s particularly, if you went in a car, you came out the ground at the end of the match, and you'd get an escort to the train station if you wanted all the coaches. But if you'd park your car a few streets away, you took your life in your hands, really. And they were parading around the ground after the game waiting for you. So the fans, their fans, and I'm sure our fans when they came to Old Trafford, made it very intense. So it had the perfect cocktail, really, of intensity, rivalry on the pitch and also on the terraces. Murph's right, 60s, 70s and 80s were the worst times between United and Liverpool, but it's the worst time for hooliganism in this country. It's mellowed a bit. I think Hillsborough did take the sting out of it. Liverpool stopped all that Munich chanting after that, and we laid off a bit, But I like it. It's a healthy rivalry. The thing is, I worked with Liverpool fans around about 99 when we won the treble. That was great. I worked over there. But what I found when you got close to them, you could have a chat with them. Now, with Leeds, it's more intense. You can't have a normal football conversation as a Man United supporter with a Leeds supporter before it gets a bit vitriolic, I'm not saying it hit you or whatever, but if you're in an office somewhere in a cafe and someone's a Leeds supporter, there's that instant, like a cat when it jumps back when it's been scared, and you're on your guard. So Liverpool.
Do you think that's because like the United do you think it's because the experiences of United fans talking to other fans, especially in the Premier League era, the way that fans of many, many clubs turn up and behave towards probably all big clubs, but particularly United and Liverpool, do you think that's influenced it, that kind of in the last, I don't know, quarter of a century or more, that people have sort of gone, oh, actually, there's quite a lot in common with them because, people behave in a similar way probably towards Liverpool as they do to United?
You mean, is it over-exaggerated?
No, I don't mean that. I mean, are the Scousers going through similar experiences because people have spent a long time? I was definitely jealous of them growing up, but I thought they'd bought every referee, that they won every game by luck when I was a kid. And then, I thought that I'd never seen Manchester United win the league when I was a young teenager, and then they did. They won it I was still probably quite young, when I was a middle-aged teenager. But after that, I saw the same kind of jealousy and nonsense directed at Manchester United as I'd been guilty of as a kid.
Yeah.
And I just wonder sometimes if they, like, sometimes you see in each other that, like, you get teams turning up and they do the same old songs. And I think they probably get, like, all their fans come from Norway and Ireland and all that kind of stuff, where, because they're really probably the only club in this country apart from United who are extremely well known around the world. They've probably kind of, there's a comparison there. United are the biggest club, everyone knows that. For me, Liverpool are easily the second biggest club and in this country. And there's probably only 5, 6, 7 in the world who can boast, at most actually, like proper worldwide support. But the mistake fans of these other clubs seem to make sometimes is that means that you're not also the biggest dog in your own town. And I wonder if they kind of get that about us and we get that about them sometimes.
Yes, I would. Yes, I would have thought so. I see what you mean. Liverpool and United are the two biggest English teams. Arsenal third place, but United's success in the 90s and 2000s, and Liverpool's more in the last 10, 12 years, has built in with the Premier League era, the televised era of all the matches. So it has spread around the world. But I guess what happened when in the 60s, when the rivalry kind of kicked in, United and Liverpool by 67 titles each. Then went, of course, as we all know, 26 years without winning another one, whereas Liverpool were hoovering up all the titles and cups and even European cups. So we were very, very jealous. There's no doubt about it. And that drove our I don't like to use the word hatred, but it was hatred of them. And so I think us winning the league in 93 for the first time took a bit of the sting out of it. And then we went on to win the double and some trebles, etc. But yeah, when you're the king, and we're probably the two kings, United and Liverpool, of English football, other clubs misunderstand you anyway. They're very jealous of you.
So I think that, like, Leeds have that, and it's one way. And I think that's why you can't have that serious conversation with most Leeds fans, because I think for them, it's like United have pinched all their top players. They're really bitter generally about, like, they call themselves champions of Europe because there was a dodgy referee one time and, couldn't come back and do it again. Like no one else has ever been robbed and stuff like that. There's just a kind of ironically, like a genuine victim mentality in all that. And I find the same as you, that whenever you chat to Leeds fans in general, that it becomes difficult because they're kind of like, you're like more than, we, from our point of view, why aren't you concerned with like Bradford City or Sheffield Wednesday or Sheffield United? But from their point of view, their eyes are only for us, right? But then unless they're in the division or they're competing with you and on one occasion beating you for the title, in my lifetime anyway, you can barely name any of their players. Like they don't register at all for us.
Oh, they don't. I guess Leeds fans that are still alive now will have watched their team come up from the second division again, like Liverpool did in 63, 64, and then they dominated. If they didn't win the league or the cup, they were in the finals or sort of the semi-finals. And they had that till about 1975, 76, 77. So they had about 13 years of it. Apart from that league winners in 92, with Strachan and Cantona, they've been yearning for that, so they peaked and didn't do much after 77, which is 50 years ago now, nearly. So they're a bit like Newcastle, I think, and Villa, big club. Yeah, they are a big club. I count them as a big club, but maybe with a small mentality.
And that's especially true in your house, Murph.
What's that, mate?
It's especially true in your house, isn't it? You're telling me your old man has a soft spot for Leeds?
Yeah, he has. He really does not like Leeds at all. He bred that into me from a young age. So when Leeds were relegated in '82, I was 9 years of age. They came back up in 1990 when I was a young adult, and I already despised Leeds United, despite having United not come across them during my childhood of watching the football. But he remembers the very days and the horrible stuff that was going on with that team, the win at all cost mentality, which you see a lot more nowadays. But in those days, it was there's more like a Corinthian, generally more of a Corinthian spirit in English football. And he even hated the fact that he changed the colours to all white from the yellow and blue because he wanted to resemble Real Madrid. He said he had no identity. He said that's the thing with Leeds United. And Pete pointed out before, Leeds United, if you come across a Leeds United fan, you're going to come across almost a wall of vitriol immediately when they find out that you're Man Yo, right? But if you come across a Scouser, most of them will go, all right. The conversation go either way. Most of the time, one-on-one, it's fine. But you just do not get that with a Leeds United fan. They have to keep up with their appearance. Despise them, which is perfectly fine by me. I don't really care one way or the other about them. But I have a chip in the shoulder, Leeds, about United, the way Liverpool don't. And the other thing about the likes of Leeds is that, and this goes to City as well, for all the recent successes, is that you pointed out before, you got the big matches. You got Boca against River Plate, Milan, Inter Milan, Barcelona, Madrid, Celtic, Rangers, United, Liverpool. The blue ribbon matches around the world. City and Leeds don't come anywhere close to it. Nobody cares.
Outside this country. There's really interesting stuff that...
Even outside the cities.
Yeah, fair enough. To our, I don't know if we say listeners or viewers, because we're YouTube first on this podcast, so let us say the captured engagement units. Let us know if you're one of our captured engagement units. Let us know what you think about all this. We're perfectly happy to hear from you on all the socials, and you can email us, creamofmanchester88@gmail.com. Even you might want to write for our new Substack, of which Murph's in charge. So maybe you've got something burning issue that you want to address. We are up for new writers, so do let us know and do get in touch. And this one, Pete might even turn into this. Maybe we'll ask you to write it up for the Substack, or maybe AI will do it on the back of this episode. But tell me about Rivalries in general, because Rivals, far from being a novel I'm sure we've all read by Jilly Cooper, it's not something that's always happened, because I'm not saying you're old enough. We nearly got Roy on. I'm not saying you're old enough for this, but there were purples in Manchester, right? There were people who used to go and watch both clubs, and I'm sure that happened absolutely everywhere in days gone by, and it's very much a thing of the past, right? Where's all this started?
Right. Well, I guess when you look at, without getting too deep or too...
Go as deep as you want.
All right. Mankind has always wanted to fight, and when I say mankind, it's mainly men. They wanted conflict. You know, the Greeks fought the Romans, and the Christians fought the Moors, and Britain's had its battles with across the empire. So there's always been some sort of conflicts, and that rivalry is sometimes born out of making money or its geography. It's tribalism basically, and it's part of what we are. But it moves to football. There was always rivalry in football, even going back to the early 1900s. You know, Newcastle and Sunderland, we saw the pictures recently of what happened last weekend. Well, that was going on. There was riots in the streets and around the ground in the early 1900s when they had their derbies. Millwall got their ground shut in 1934, I think it was. There's always been intense rivalry at football, but a seismic change happened around in the early 60s, and it sometimes one thing will trigger it and then other things carry it along. But around about 57, 58, I think the youth
because that
movement,
time Roy started going. Okay, yeah.
He'll be marking me out of 10 on this. But I think the generation that came up after the war wanted to get away from that post-war depression and poverty, and they wanted to have fun. And rock and roll came in and carried it along for a bit. But then there'd never been youth culture before that. They'd been teenagers, but they didn't have their own fashion, their own way of talking, their own music, etc. But it started happening in the late 50s, early 60s. Another thing that contributed to the change or accelerated it was from 48 to 57. If you were between 17 and 21 and male, you had to join the army, you had to go into national service. And they stopped that 31st of December 1960. Now, McCartney said if they hadn't have stopped that, you'd never have had the Beatles. And what he means by that, it's obvious. If you went in the army at 17, it knocks all that rebelliousness out of you. You know what I mean? And you were very orderly. You came, but not everybody, but most people came out very civilized and orderly. When it stopped, it gave teenagers this platform really to be what they wanted to be. And the mods came in, the rockers came in, the greasers, the Teds, and it went on to the hippie movement and all that. So a big change in society. Football grabbed a part of that because the youth who had previously gone with their mum or their dad or a couple of mates wanted to all go and meet up at the match. And they wanted to go in the same part of the ground, and they wanted to sing their own songs. Before, you'd had songs played by the Beswick Prize Band or something, or clubs had their own song. Portsmouth had the Pompey Chimes back in the 50s, and Norwich had a song in the early 90s again. But at that time, 63...
County and the Wheelbarrow song.
Yeah, exactly. But around 63, they started singing their own songs, had their own end, and that's when United fans migrated, or the youth of United fans, teenagers up to about 25, moved towards the Stretford end. They put a roof on it in 62, so they moved towards the Stretford end so the singing could be heard better. You used to be able to change ends at half-time. I don't mean the team, but you could walk from one end of the ground to the other. You go around behind the stand, and if you're kicking towards the scoreboard in the second half, you walk round from the Stretford end and vice versa. But it got blocked off around about 63, so the entity that was a Stretford end came into being around 63, 64. And that's when the charts music came in, and fans made up, the Pete Boyles of their day made up their own songs. And it grew and grew and grew. And you had your own ends, and the main ends were the Cop at Liverpool, obviously, Gladys Street at Everton, and the Stretford end at United. Everybody, Barrow and Grimsby, would have had a little end of their own. But the thing was to defend that end in the streets outside where the turnstiles are, and God forbid if anybody tried to come in, you know, unless it was a lot of them. And then that just grew through the 60s. So the tribalism came in because of the youth culture movement that took place in Britain from about 57 to about 65. And that rivalry, if you think of the rivalry we've talked about, Liverpool and United and Leeds and United, they were the teams that were at each other's throats then, you know. So you can have your keen rivalries to do with what's happening on the pitch. From 98 to 2013 with Arsenal and Wenger. But some of the rivalries come about because of what's happening, has happened on the pitch or has happened on the terraces rather than the pitch or in the streets around the ground. Does any of that make sense?
I think it's absolutely disgustingly subversive that you have linked what might happen in football to wider society when we all know that football is a completely separate entity and that it has to have an entirely different set of rules from the rest of society. Wash your mouth out and apologise to the government who've just introduced this tailgating ban and just shown you that we are a lower class of people than the people who watch other sports or go to concerts. Now think on. Who are, Murph, the pretenders? Who are the worst set of fans? Or name 2 or 3 clubs by all means who genuinely think they have a rivalry with Manchester United and you would never, ever think twice about them.
Stoke City is probably my favourite one. I mean, Leicester City and Bolton are honourable mentions, but Stoke, I mean, like, Christ, you're up at Stoke. I mean, it's if you can tell which eye's actually staring at you when they're screaming all kinds of poison at you. I mean, it's you look at them, are you all right, pal?
What is that about? Because like, it's not even a real place, is it, Stoke? And what's the?
To me, knowledge,
because it's reasonably nearby.
Well, it's about 50 miles away, isn't it? I've done the drive many a time, but the thing is that I mean, I'm not sure if Manchester's nicked any of the pottery trade there or anything like that. I mean, maybe it's too much clay around there. Maybe there's smoking or something. I don't know. But, you know, it's a nuts house, Stoke. I mean, my wife, who's got friends who live in Stoke or who grew up in Stoke, will say the same thing. There's something in the air around the place. But it's not just Stoke. It's places like Leicester and, as I say, Bolton. Bolton have a thing going back to 1958 when the bus got at Ilma the Ice on an open top parade. Maybe I can understand a little bit of that beef, but I mean, crying out, lads. Oh, lads, it's 70 years ago. We don't care. But they Bolton Wanderers, they despise us in a way. I think, again, are you all right? It's crazy, really.
Yeah, you do get some of the spasmodic, the one-off rivals that last for a bit and then burn out, like us and Blackburn Rovers.
Well, Blackburn was like that, but that for obvious reasons, like relative proximity plus, you know, upstarts with money, and then they won the league, and also took, you know, had it not been for them, United would have had Shearer and things would have been very different. God, would we have had Cantona and all that? The one that's now, the equivalent of Blackburn now, has got to be Newcastle, hasn't it?
I don't think they'd like to hear you say that, but you're probably right. Yeah, it's whoever starts to put the head above the parapet. But yeah, it could be Newcastle. I mean, like I said before, they've got a bit of a chip on the shoulder. But you've got some one-off things. So Villa, when they robbed us of that cup final in '57, I know fans didn't like them for a while. Bolton, it was Greg getting pushed in the back of the net by Lofthouse. But you had West Ham had it bad for us for a while, because in '67 when United won the league, they won it by winning 6-1 at West Ham on a Saturday afternoon in May. And United fans, 10,000, 12,000 of them got down there in the streets of London about 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. They reckon that nobody had their milk left on the doorstep that day. That's when people, you know, used to have milk delivered, because Reds were just having that for the breakfast. But they took over the East End. Now, of course, this is the time when the Crays and the Richardsons were going, you know, but I don't think they bothered too much with football. Joking apart, that was 1967. And were one of the first fans I can remember to come in the away end to have a go at the away fans around about 71, 72. And they wanted a bit of revenge for 67. And they got it in 75 when we went there, when we come back into the first division. And they'd harboured that for about 8 years. I think Bill Burford wrote about it in his book, you know. So you can have a passing thing based on a game that happens. United and Rangers, a friendly in 1974, and it kicked off badly. It started somewhere in Chorlton on Thursday night and ended up in Bury on the Monday. Rangers came down with about 10,000 fans. But that was 74.
Sounds like John Wayne's Quiet Man, that.
Say it again.
It sounds like John Wayne's Quiet Man film, that one.
But the thing is, that was 74, so you might say, what are you going on about, Pete? That's prehistoric. That rivalry lasted to 2003 when Tony and his Men in Black went up there in numbers quietly and went on the Paisley Road, and I witnessed some of this. I wasn't with them. Pulled the plug out the jukeboxes in each of the pubs as they went in and just says, right, this is our pub now, or words to that effect. Said that was revenge for something that had happened 30 years earlier. So there was quite a bit of a rivalry going on there. So you can get some one-offs, you know.
Okay, to finish off, we need to go back to City because we've barely discussed them, and I think no, but the thing is that I'm talking about one or two down the years, but we've all met, haven't we? United fans who were having much more in for City than Liverpool. They're just really, really rare. I've met one or two. I'm certain of would say cares much more about City than Liverpool. But are you you're shaking your head, Murph? Is that have you never met anyone like that?
I met one or two. I'm literally no more than one or two. But I mean, you can't really belittle. I mean, they are a massive club. I mean, I was outside Villa Park one day when I was hearing 120 reasons why they were massive clubs.
More likely 115, I'd have thought. It probably risen to 130 by the time he came out of the ground, though, hadn't it?
Absolutely.
It'll be forgotten about.
Yeah, certainly by now. But, there was a multitude. So City are massive. They're absolutely massive. Yeah, I really care about them.
There will be 500,000 of them getting off that hill in Blackburn soon, right into us. Any other business, gents?
No, we didn't do European rivalries. We can do that another time, maybe.
Well, that's a good one, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one for another episode. And God, we'll need some in the summer, if not before. Well, that was a lot of fun, gents. Thanks very much. We found out that football rivalry started because of street gangs, in particular Pete, Roy and their team of beatniks, who met on the Stretford end and somehow didn't end up supporting Forest Green Rovers. Next time, we'll rank the worst owners in modern football. Actually, scratch that, because the internet doesn't have enough bandwidth to support that. Behave yourself.